Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my Champions League Matchday 6 predictions. Some predictions for Matchday 5 aged pretty well, but then, for example, I predicted the wrong Premier League team to flop and get a draw. Either way, what a Champions League campaign it has been so far. There's a lot to go through in each of the matches. Please, as always, let me know your predictions down below. Drop an early like if you're enjoying the series, subscribe if you're new, and let's get into it. Starting off with my club, Dinamo Zagreb, taking on Celtic. Now, Dinamo Zagreb are an interesting case. They haven't won a match in over a month. In fact, the last match they won was in the Champions League, but not their last Champions League match. That one they lost to Dortmund 3-0. Back in November, they scored 4 against the weakest team in the competition so far, Slovan Bratislava. I guess the club just partied too hard after they saw the Champions League standings, being above Real Madrid and PSG, which is still the same to this day, despite losing to Dortmund. There were lots of draws within the month, but still, they also lost to their rivals Hajduk Split away, definitely setting them back in the Croatian league. Maybe Hajduk Split can finally win the league after 20 years themselves. Regardless of this losing streak, they should not lose hope. Like I said, they are still above PSG and Real Madrid in the Champions League overall standings, and they do have a playoff spot. It's hanging by a thread though, so they need to win matches like this against Celtic, as the rest of their schedule is extremely difficult. Meanwhile, Celtic have definitely had a more positive run on form. They did unfortunately drop points in their last Champions League match against Club Brugge, drawing 1-1, but prior to that, they defeated RB Leipzig, and in their domestic league, they have been scoring quite a number of goals. They're also somewhat hanging by a thread, a bit above Dinamo, 20th place in the standings. Dinamo is only 1 point behind them, so this honestly is a must-win for both clubs. Obviously, I want to be very hopeful at Dinamo Zagreb, and you know what? Celtic might struggle playing against Maksimir. It is not a pleasant stadium to go to, especially if the weather conditions are terrible. We did see Monaco nearly lose there. Dinamo did blow their lead, but still. You know what? I'm going to be a tad bit hopeful for Dinamo. I'm going to say this match goes neither of their ways, and it finishes in a 2-2 draw. Let's move on now to Girona versus Liverpool. Unfortunately, Liverpool's match against Everton had to be cancelled over the weekend, while Girona over the weekend got annihilated by Real Madrid. Girona have only been able to pick up 1 win so far in the Champions League. They even lost their last match in the competition against Sturm Graz, which was definitely a must-win given their schedule. At times, they do pick up some solid wins, but in reality, their form has been all over the place, while Liverpool are looking much more consistent of a team. They are top of the Champions League standings and top of the Premier League table, so I just cannot see them flopping this match. I think they have what it takes to get a 4-0 victory against Girona, even if it's away. Moving on out to Brest versus PSV, probably one of the more underrated matches in this match week. Brest have a very impressive track record so far in the Champions League. 3 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss, 11th place. PSV are surprisingly below them at 18th place. Now, they haven't been doing terribly so far. They have had quite a tough schedule, but they still do struggle at times against clubs from other countries. In the Netherlands, though, it's no issue for them. They've been annihilating so many teams. They're at the top of the league, only losing to Ajax once this season. Over the weekend, they picked up a 6-1 victory. Brest have had a fantastic run so far in the Champions League. I am rooting for them, honestly, but I do think PSV's explosiveness will have them struggling here. I think this will be a high-scoring match, though, and Brest will put off a fantastic fight. But PSV will win this one 3-2. Moving on now to Shakhtar versus Bayern Munich. Bayern had an explosive start in the Champions League, demolishing Dinamo Zagreb, and it went south from there, but they picked themselves back up now. They're at 13th place in the standings, while Shakhtar all the way at 26th. They still have the same amount of points as PSG though. Some good fights, but many of their matches were cut too close. I do think they have what it takes to put off a decent fight against Bayern Munich, but I don't see them getting away with this one. Definitely some question marks in Bayern Munich. We did just see them get knocked out of the DFB Pokal to Leverkusen. Shared points with Dortmund, but in their other recent matches, they secured wins. You know what I said? I could see Shakhtar putting off a good fight. Definitely possible, but I'm actually going to say Bayern win this match 3-0. Let's move on now to Club Brugge versus Sporting. Club Brugge have actually been sneaking points in this competition. We saw them defeat Aston Villa. Last time around, they shared points with Celtic. This side are not to be underestimated. And although Sporting have had a very, very strong start in the season, things are not looking to be as dominant as they were before, ever since Amonim's departure. He's not having a fun time at Manchester United either, but since he left in the Champions League and their own domestic league, they have not picked up a win, including getting battered by Arsenal 5-1. It's crazy how much of an impact this manager had on this club, as while he was there, they demolished Manchester City. Definitely if this match were not too long ago, I would say this is an easy Sporting win, but honestly, Bruges can sneak through here. Sure, of course, Sporting have so much quality they easily could go back to winning ways, but I'm going to say this one finishes in a 1-1 draw. Moving on now to Salzburg versus PSG. RB Salzburg only picking up 1 win so far, surprisingly against Feyenoord, after they've had a disastrous campaign so far in the competition. And in the very last match day against Leverkusen, they got annihilated 5-0. Hasn't been good for PSG either though. Like I said, they are below Dinamo Zagreb in the standings, the highest placed team to be in elimination zone, and they desperately need to get out. You gotta feel for them though. They have had a tough schedule so far, and in some of their matches where they did lose, they did play pretty well. They obviously just struggled to convert the goals. Of course, they're still killing it domestically though. They have not lost a match yet, top of the league. This side obviously struggle against clubs elsewhere outside of France, but I think they should be able to handle Salzburg comfortably, considering they have been in pretty poor form this season. Earlier they have been looking lifeless, but now they have picked themselves up a tad bit, but still not enough for me to be convinced that they can defeat a side like PSG. I'll say PSG finally get their first comfortable win in the Champions League, defeating them 3-0. This one is interesting though. RB Leipzig versus Aston Villa. As I brought up a million times on this channel now, everyone was clowning me for my Leipzig prediction, putting them in elimination zone. And now they are far worse than I've even imagined. One of the only 3 clubs in the competition to get 5-for-5 losses so far. It's without a doubt shocking when you look at their squad. I did predict this though because their schedule is tough. And technically it shouldn't be getting easier. Aston Villa are a great side, but Aston Villa have also been very poor lately. Yes, they did just grab 2 wins in the Premier League, very narrow one against Southampton, and defeating Brentford 3-1. But prior to those 2 victories, they didn't get a win in 8 matches. They had a solid start in the Champions League, but they failed to get a win in their last 2 matches there as well. At least they somewhat held off a tough opponent like Juventus. And let's not forget, they did defeat Bayern Munich at the beginning of the competition, so they already have something to their resume that they are capable of handling clubs from the Bundesliga. Leipzig are honestly in a somewhat similar situation. They won their last 2 matches pretty convincingly against Frankfurt, but prior they got annihilated by Wolfsburg and didn't pick up a win in the entire month of November. So honestly, looking at it, both of these clubs are in very similar runs of form right now. Leipzig desperately need a win though. Aston Villa still have some security under their belt, but of course they want to make things a little bit more solidified. Oh, it's a tough one, especially with the fact that Leipzig previously had a solid home record until that terrible streak that they had. I might go for a draw on this one. I know it's a bit underwhelming, but I'm going to say it finishes 0-0. Moving on out to Leverkusen versus Inter. Although Liverpool are at the top of the Champions League standings, Inter have also arguably been one of the best teams in the competition. They're the only club who have yet to concede a goal. That can be broken this week though, as obviously Leverkusen are an incredible side and they are traveling away. Leverkusen in the most recent matches have been clutch. The only time they heavily disappointed was against a top club like Liverpool, where they lost 4-0 at Anfield. Obviously not the same standards as what Xabi Alonso did last season, but you also got to keep in mind that this season is a bit more demanding in terms of their schedule. They're in the Champions League now as well. Still, without a doubt, a top club that Inter cannot underestimate. Both sides definitely have in-form attacking options. Inter with one of the most famous duos of Martinez and Thuram. I'm torn about this one, but I'm going to say Inter just squeezed through for a 1-0 victory away. Moving on out to Atalanta versus Real Madrid. Oh my days, Real Madrid are not catching a break. Atalanta have been superb this season. I'm recording this while Napoli are playing Lazio, so I have no idea what the standings will look like while I upload this video, but they are currently battling it out for the Serie A title. They are also one of the only 3 teams undefeated in the Champions League so far, while Real Madrid are on thin ice, hanging on to that final playoff spot at 24th. Who would have thought any of this? Shout out to Atalanta though. Gasperini has been phenomenal. Retegui has been incredible up top. Lookman as well. Real Madrid cannot take this match lightly whatsoever. And them playing away, you already know the Atalanta fans will be giving it their all in a fixture like this. Now, Real Madrid in the last Champions League match day got outplayed by Liverpool. Kylian Mbappe missed a penalty there. He missed a penalty a week after against Athletic Club Bilbao. Sure, they're getting the wins against Getafe and Girona, but Atalanta is a genuinely serious club in this competition, and they look to be unfazed by any opponent. Also, they're still suffering injuries. Vini Jr. is still not expected to play in this match. Let's also not forget that these sides face each other in the UEFA Super Cup final, where Real Madrid got a solid 2-0 victory, but Atalanta are just on a roll right now. Real Madrid are genuinely in trouble when you look at their standings, but the rest of their schedule looks to be doable. I think they will secure a playoff spot at the end, but I think they might struggle here. I'm going to say Atalanta are able to just edge Real Madrid 2-1. Moving on to Atletico Madrid versus Slovan Bratislava. I'm going to be brief on this one because I think it's a bit more obvious. Slovan Bratislava are currently second to last place in the standings, one of the only 3 teams to get 5 for 5 losses, and it's not really much of a surprise as going into this, I did expect them to finish last place by the end. Atletico Madrid in the last Champions League match, they were able to demolish Sparta Praha 6-0. Should we go for another 6-0? I'm going to say it finishes 5-0 instead this time. Moving on now to Lille versus SK Sturm Graz. Sturm Graz just picked up their first win against Girona, while Lille were able to hold off Juventus, defeat both Madrid clubs, and just narrowly beat Bologna recently. Their only loss so far in the Champions League came to Sporting. Of course, this side are prone to slipping, but overall, they've definitely had a very impressive season. Sturm Graz are not going to make this easy. They've had many sides struggle against them, failing to score loads of goals, definitely keeping it close. I think Lille will still win this one though, 1-0. Moving on now to Benfica versus Bologna. Thankfully, I broke the Benfica curse. A lot of times I predict this club incorrectly, but they were able to defeat Monaco like I thought they would on the last match day. Definitely was a massive win as Monaco have been in very good form this season. Benfica overall have not slowed down. Yes, they did lose to Bayern prior, but straight after that they defeated their rivals Porto 4-1. It looks like Bologna woke up after they lost to Lille, getting some impressive wins and even drew with Juventus. However, to me, Benfica still look like the favorites in a matchup like this. I'm going to say they win this one 3-1. Moving on now to Milan versus Crvena Zvezda. Crvena Zvezda absolutely destroyed Stuttgart last time, 5-1. While Milan did defeat Slovan Bratislava, but it was definitely closer than people thought it would be. Following that, they bounced back, even being able to defeat Sassuolo 6-1. But this weekend, they lost to Atalanta. But we've already talked about how brilliant that club has been. Going back to Crvena Zvezda defeating Stuttgart, it definitely was surprising because prior they were getting annihilated by clubs, conceding 5 to Barcelona, 5 to Monaco, and 4 to Inter. They are a great, energetic club with some exciting youngsters coming into the scene, but I do think Milan at the San Siro has what it takes to get a comfortable win. I'm going to say, they maybe concede a goal, but it still finishes 3-1 for Milan. Moving on to one of the biggest matches on paper on this match day. Dortmund versus Barcelona. Dortmund, besides blowing their 2-0 lead at halftime against Real Madrid, had been on a roll in this competition. That was their only loss, and they were even able to destroy Celtic 7-1. They failed to pick up any wins in the Bundesliga after destroying Dinamo Zagreb, but one of them was against Bayern Munich, and they were still both draws. Barcelona, on the other hand, were looking really promising at moments throughout the season to be one of the most informed clubs in the world. Rightfully so as well. Back-to-back, they destroyed Bayern Munich and Real Madrid straight after. But recently in La Liga, they had been costing themselves some points. Losing 1-0 to Real Sociedad last month, sharing points with Celta Vigo, strong performance in the Champions League straight after, but then losing to Las Palmas, bounce back again against Mallorca, but then drop points to Real Betis, conceding a stoppage time goal as well. Barcelona are clearly prone to making mistakes. Whether or not those mistakes are present though, this is a very exciting side to watch. But at the same time, Dortmund should be showing confidence. Why not? They're an electric side. Lewandowski being the top goal scorer of the competition at the moment, also going up against one of his old clubs. Definitely going to be a fantastic match. But I do think that Dortmund will just win this one 2-1. Let's move on out to Feyenoord versus Sparta Praha. Feyenoord are the only side, like I mentioned, to lose to Salzburg. Sparta Praha lost to Atletico Madrid 6-0, and at the time, I think they were going through some internal problems. Definitely were not looking convincing in form. They finally bounced back in December, though. Going back to Feyenoord on the last Champions League match day, they did draw with Manchester City, coming back very well. 100% they deserve the credit, but Manchester City's defense that match was dreadful. Feyenoord have a good chunk of injuries, which is definitely unfortunate, but for a fixture like this, I think with the options they have, they can still handle this club. I'm going to say they win this one 2-0. Another massive fixture on paper now, Juventus versus Manchester City. As we know, Manchester City have been in awful form. They weren't able to win 7 matches in a row. Then finally picked up their form against Nottingham Forest, but now drew with Crystal Palace over the weekend. Even in the Champions League, they blew their lead to Feyenoord like I mentioned. Pep Guardiola looked like an absolute mess after that match. And now it's not going to be any easier having to face such a top Italian club, the only club to be undefeated in the Serie A at the time of this recording. And the only match they lost in the Champions League was against Stuttgart, with them conceding a stoppage time goal. Definitely an exciting new side under Thiago Motta, but that being said, this side are picking up way too many draws. They have way more draws than wins in the Serie A, despite being undefeated, and even in the Champions League, 2 wins and 2 draws for them. So that being said, I'm going to be boring and say that this one finishes also in a draw. I will go for 0-0. Moving on to Stuttgart versus Young Boys. Stuttgart, like I already mentioned, got destroyed by Crvena Zvezda when they traveled to Belgrade, but they did pick themselves up after, not losing since. They've only picked up 1 win so far in the Champions League, and it was surprisingly against Juventus. This is a must-win for them, as Young Boys have not picked up any draws even. They are one of the only 3 clubs to get 5 for 5 losses. I think Stuttgart have what it takes to get a 2-0 win here. And the final match we're looking at is Arsenal versus Monaco. Definitely a tough one to call. Arsenal dropped points over the weekend to Fulham, drawing that one. And as we've seen this season, Monaco are definitely dangerous. They look to have at the moment a bit of a defensive problem, but they still are scoring so many goals throughout each of their matches. And although Arsenal did drop points to Fulham, they did get very convincing wins prior, defeating Sporting with 5 goals, beating Manchester United, even scoring 5 against West Ham. I think Arsenal have what it takes to win this match 4-2. I will go for a absurd scoreline, I guess. Well, there you have it, guys. Those are all of my Champions League predictions. Don't forget to let me know yours in the comments down below. And thank you all for making it to the end. I will see you all very, very soon. Take care. La cu noite.